Oh, it's official. Okay. So welcome to our Treble Talk, our first of what we hope to be a series of events sponsored by the New York ACDA chapter. My name is Liz Geisewite. You all got an email from me. That's how you got here today, probably through the link that I sent you. I'm based in Brooklyn, and I work full time at the Brooklyn Youth Chorus. I also have two adult treble choirs, Brooklyn Treble Choir and Accord Treble Choir. And treble choir is my thing. And so I'm very proud and happy to serve as your repertoire and resources co-chair for treble choirs in New York State. So without further ado, I'm going to actually pass it over to my co-chair, Brian, who's going to get us started with our guests.
Hi. How's everybody doing today? It's good to see you all. Can everybody hear me fine? Um, as Liz said, my name is Brian Stevens. I'm based in Rochester, New York, where I am about to launch a professional women's chamber choir, Vox Eius. Um, if anyone's interested in that, you can send me a message. Um, like Liz, I'm a treble choir specialist. It's my jam, it's my thing, and especially women identifying choral composers as well. I'm currently part of a book publication upcoming, and I do a lot of work in Sweden and Scandinavia with women choral composers. So this is just fantastic to be here with all of you in common interest and love, and to have these amazing composers here who thankfully we can all call friends also. So first up, we have Katerina Gimon. Uh, she's a composer, improviser, and vocalist. Her uniquely dynamic, poignant, and eclectic compositional style is rapidly gaining her reputation as a distinctive voice in contemporary Canadian composition, but really global. Her music has been described as sheer radiance, imbued with human emotion, and capable of taking listeners on a fascinating journey of textural discovery, earning her several honors, including SOCAN Awards in 2016 and 2021, nomination for Western Canadian Composer of the Year last year, and Barbara Pentland Award for Outstanding Composition in 2022. Her music draws inspiration from a myriad of places that she'll tell us about, from Eastern European folk music to indie rock, as well as from her roots as a songwriter, which we want to know more about. Katerina's works are performed widely across Canada, the United States, and internationally. She's just a terrific composer doing some really visceral and evocative music, as some of you probably already know, and she's going to share with us. So, Katerina, it's our joy and honor to have you here with us. Take it away.
Thank you so much for the wonderful intro there, Brian. Whew, it's a lot to be starting off this set of three amazing composers. So thank you. Woo, pressure's on. I'm going to start it by actually throwing a link in the chat there. I'm going to talk about a couple pieces today, and I thought it would be great if I just had a roundup of where you can find the scores and links for those. And because I'm ambitious, I have a couple that I may or may not get to, plus some bonus ones. So you can listen to those later if you'd like in your own time. But this is a great place with just a roundup of everything. And my contact info is at the bottom in case you want to reach out to me for rep suggestions and all that. Okay, so that's out of the way. For my 15-20 minutes that I'm going to be doing today, the way I decided to structure it to break things up a little bit is I'm going to do a little bit of talking about various aspects of my career, and then I'm going to break it up with a piece. So I'll see 3, maybe 4 excerpts. We shall see. First off, I'll talk a little bit about myself and where I came from. So you heard a little bit from Brian, but basically I grew up in Southern Ontario, not too far from Buffalo, New York, actually, like just over the border, in Burlington, Ontario. And I grew up singing in a wonderful children's choir called the Hamilton Children's Choir, which is where my love for choral music was born. I had sung for a number of years before then, and I was, very, very, very shy. I remember my audition for the Hamilton Children's Choir. I sang my favorite things, and I was so nervous that I forgot the list of things, and I just made up a new one. But luckily, our conductor was very welcoming. Her name is Infira Polos. Some of you might know her because she's sort of does work in that area. She had also just moved from Kazakhstan, so her English wasn't that great, so maybe that was also part of it. But anyways, that's an aside. I ended up singing in that choir for a number of years and touring as a youth to Sweden, Poland, getting exposed to a whole wide array of choral music at a very young age. Before I sort of knew to be, maybe terrified or weirded out by this whole array of things, I sang a lot of Murray Schafer, for example, a Canadian choral music composer who does a lot of work with aleatory, who is one of the people who has influenced me a lot. Around that time as well, while I was doing choir, I had started writing, but not in the classical composition world, actually as a songwriter. And I think a huge part of the reason for that is I grew up in an era where there were so many strong female vocalists in the pop music world. I listened to Joni Mitchell when I was really young, and then Alanis Morissette was really popular, Avril Lavigne. There was just a lot of really great female-led people in the pop world at that point. So I think I identified a little bit more with it at that point. So I sort of started in that realm. And then when I went off to university, not even planning to take composition, I took an elective and accidentally ended up falling in love with choral writing. And I wrote a piece at that point, which is actually in my document for you, if you're interested in seeing, called Boundless. And it was my first time trying to combine my songwriting style in the choral music world. And that was basically the gateway and the turning point for me, and me discovering that in reality, my instrument per se was choir and writing for choir. And there was no turning back from there. After that point, I also ended up studying improvisation in university. The school I studied at happened to also offer a free improvisation program. So free classical improvisation as opposed to jazz improvisation. I should specify they're very different things, which really opened up my eyes in terms of the ways I could use my voice in a more instrumental way. A lot of people, especially when they listen to some of my pieces like Fire, for example, which is one we heard as people were coming in, and I'll talk a little bit about later today. They always wonder where that came from. And a huge part of that comes from the fact that I ended up, being the lone vocalist in a group of instrumentalists in a free improvisation program. So I learned to use my voice in very weird ways because I had to sing alone with the tuba and somehow be the accompaniment or whatever. A lot of interesting challenges that I got put under. I know. How does one do that? You have to think really outside the box. So it got me thinking very creatively, and a lot of that permeated into the music that I write. Okay, so I'm going to play a piece, and this one's called All Together We Are Love. I think that's the first one I was going to play. And I wrote this one while I'm sharing my screen. I'll tell you a little bit about this one. I wrote this one back in 2017, I believe, for Electra Women's Choir, right where I'm living right now in Vancouver. Where is the share screen button? Oh, here it is. And their conductor, Morna Edmondson, had asked me if I could write something that could be learned as part of their women's leadership workshop with choirs of all ages within the span of about an hour, learned and sort of performed all together within an hour. But she was also interested in finding a way to introduce the idea of aleatory and exploration in the piece, which is something I do a lot. So this piece is a great introduction to the world of aleatoric singing. It has a little blip in the middle, which is where I'm going to play the piece and tell. So it's a great introduction if you've never done it before with your choir. But the piece is also about empowerment and a very quick learn actually as well. So I'll give this one a play, and we'll take a listen to the score as well. Okay, so that one gave you a little bit of the opening of All Together We Are Love. And I stopped right at that point that I was talking about with that little glimpse into the world of aleatory. I don't know if you could see the score because I'm sure it was small on your screen, but basically what I had done is I just had some held notes that changed once or twice per part, not terribly often, and everyone gets to say the words in their own time on that pitch. Super simple, but a really great way to introduce the idea of aleatory and singers having freedom within their own part. And groups have so much fun with this, especially ones that have never done it before, just getting to make up their own rhythm and really just be there, let their voices shine in a way in these pieces. So that's All Together We Are Love. Now I'm going to play a piece that we heard a little bit at the beginning. It's super short. It's called Fire. And this one is essentially an embodiment of elemental fire. Very rhythmic, very energetic. And I wanted to play it today. A lot of people might think that it was originally written for SAAvvy, which is true in a way. The original premiere was for SAAvvy Voices, but you may not know that I actually wrote it for SSAA Voices originally because of my compositional process. So I'll talk a little bit about that after I play the piece. But a secret for all you today, because this is Treble Talk, you get to know that it was actually written for Treble Voices first, and then I rearranged it. So those singers absolutely killed it. I just have to say, this is absolutely fantastic performance, but it links back to what I was talking about earlier. I write music, or I started writing music and falling in love with the choir world because I was very shy, and choir helped me find my voice. So in a way, I write music now because I'm trying to help other people find their own voices as well. And I think this video and this performance is a perfect example of that, because you can see each individual's fire just shining through. I know that's very punny, but you can see that in the performance, and I think that's why people connect with it so much. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my compositional process now. Let's pop over here. Can you all see the brainstorming document? Yes, perfect. Okay, so I mentioned I came from a background as a songwriter, and I didn't actually start composing classically until I came to university. And because of that, I developed this process that involves actually writing down my music very, very late in the creation of a piece. So you just heard fire. This is what fire looked like in its earliest form. I decided I wanted to write a piece about elemental fire. So what I did for this piece, and I do for most of my pieces, is I write the title or whatever the idea of the piece is in the middle. Then I'll collect all the ideas that come to mind with regards to that. So here you can see embers, spark, flames, and little doodles around the rest of the page. If it's a piece that involves text, that might involve some lines from the text, keywords, maybe some emotional words, and so on. get all the ideas out. Then what I'll do in my second step, I am a bit of an amateur visual artist / doodler. And you might have seen that if you've done some of my music, I like to doodle my scores. So my second step of my process involves choosing some words from that brainstorm. So for example, the word embers or spark or transforming, and then making those into sections of the piece. And then I draw a little graphic representing the shape of the piece itself. So we just listened to that. That was about 1 minute and 30 seconds. And even if you heard this for the first time, my hope is that you heard that structure, that really large wedge, growing to about 3/4 and then the vast drop down in the piece itself. So this is the idea I had off the bat, and a way I use to organize myself when I'm composing. Then I'll go in and fill in little details about what it could be. So for example, that opening moment, I knew I wanted the ignition of the flame. You can see here I've written bam with a scribble going down. In the actual piece, it ended up being a stomp. But the kind of process that I'll go through when I'm composing is I might do a clap, I might say, what else could it be? A loud chord, and I just go through my options. And I do that for every little moment in the piece to help create it. The next step is I like to go through, I don't know if I'll play this for you, but I actually write up the entire piece in my DAW. And I was hinting before we listened to this that the piece was actually written in SSA. And of course, the reason is I'm a soprano myself. I can't sing tenor, I can't sing bass. So this piece was originally written for me. And I recorded the entire thing in my DAW. And the piece existed in that format before I even wrote any notes down. And I use this for a lot of my textural choral music. And I like this approach because I never find myself gravitating to what I know how to write down or what is easier to write down rather than what I actually want to hear. And I find it's very freeing. So I do like to do that whenever I can. And I would suggest it if you know any young composers, urge them to go this way early on, because you want to make sure that you're freeing yourself and staying creative and not getting limited by your notational abilities. So I did that. And then I wrote it down at the very end of this entire process. But Fire had existed with a choir of me that I will not show you today. It is not that great. It's not as nice. It's me screaming in my apartment. But that's a little of the story behind Fire and why I write the way I do. Okay. I think I have time to show you one piece. We've got 5 more minutes left. So the final piece I'm going to show you is called In Her Image. And I think this is one of my current favorite SSA pieces that I've written. Probably my favorite if somebody had to ask me today. A lot of the things I talked about today, how I like this idea of, texture, exploring texture, especially in women's voices, how I like living in that low alto sound. You're going to hear that as well today. I think Brian mentioned from my bio that I'm very interested or influenced by Eastern European folk music. So my family's Ukrainian, so I grew up with a lot of Ukrainian folk singing, where we have a very strong tradition of women singing and really, really just live in that low sound. Plus the choral director I had was from Russia as well. So a combination of that, I really love the rich low alto sound, and especially in my women's choir writing, I like to dive into that. So you're going to hear that, some aleatory and some very folk inspired music in this piece, and it's called In Her Image. I'm sorry to stop it at that point, but I think that is my cue. We've hit it's 12:30 for me, a couple hours later for you. That is in her image. I encourage you to check out all these pieces at the links that I sent there. And you also have my info. If anyone's interested in rep suggestions or anything, feel free to reach out. I don't know if you're going to do an intro now for the next person. Okay.
I will.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Katerina. So if people have questions, feel free to put things into the chat for right now. And at the end, we can address any and all questions. But if they're popping into your head, go ahead and type them out. And then we'll at the end, all three composers can answer your questions, which I'm sure you do have. So thanks so much, Katerina. Great. So I'm going to introduce our next wonderful composer, who is B.E. Boykin, also known as Brittany Boykin. She first pursued her interest in music during her time at Spelman College, attending classes that inspired and challenged her musical imagination and piqued her interest in composition. After graduating with her bachelor's in music, Boykin continued her studies while attending Westminster Choir College of Rider University in Princeton, New Jersey, graduating with Masters of Music in Sacred Music and receiving the R&R Young Composition Prize. Boykin has been commissioned and collaborated with several organizations, including a number of ACDA divisions, the Minnesota Opera, and the Kennedy Center. She obtained her PhD from Georgia State University with an emphasis in music education and is currently an assistant professor of music at the Georgia Institute of Technology. And we are so thrilled to have her here with us today. I am going to pass over the mic to Brittany/B.E. Boykin.
Hi, thank you, Liz, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. I created a PowerPoint just to kind of keep myself on task and to remember everything that I was supposed to say. So give me one moment, please, as I pull this up for you. But I'm so excited to be here. So thank you again. All right, so a little bit about me. I was born in Dayton, Ohio, and grew up in the DMV area, but Atlanta, Georgia is home, or Atlanta is how we say it down here. I've been in Atlanta for about almost 15 years now, so it is home. I was one of those kids who studied music very early on. My parents put me in piano lessons probably at age 7. Because they knew something was musical like happening, and they would take me to choir rehearsal and all of that with them at a very young age. So I was sitting in rehearsals probably since I was about 3 years old. So music was always around, and I applied to college for piano performance. And so that is a huge part of my writing, as I think a lot of people have learned or shared with me over the years. They're like, oh, your piano accompaniment is so this. And I'm like, okay, well, it makes sense now, because I'm like, okay, I've been studying piano for a while. So I'm a huge, huge fan of just beautiful piano accompaniment. So that's probably a huge part of it. I am B.E. Boykin, as Liz said, but Brittany is fine in conversation. So a lot of people are like, oh, where did B.E. Boykin come from? Well, my name is Brittany Elizabeth, as my mother named me. But early on in my career, I felt like I had a little bit of a struggle trying to get some music shopped out. And, Britney Spears was popular. So, it was a thing. So they were like, yeah, Brittany, and you're a woman. So I thought the name would help me. So I decided to go by my initials, and it's just kind of stuck. So I've just kind of accepted it for now, and we're just gonna rock with it. So, but Brittany is cool in conversation too. So I got started with treble choir at Spelman College. I did my undergraduate here in Atlanta at Spelman, and that is where I was first introduced to the treble sound and everything women's choir. And of course, if you don't know anything about Spelman College, it is one of 2 historically Black colleges and universities. And it is one of the oldest. And so I had never seen anything like this before, and especially it being all Black women. So it was just a little inspiring, and I was awestruck at such a very young age, but I was able to sing with them. Well, really sing and play, because the conductor at that time found out that I played piano. So I was mostly behind the piano, all 4 years, unfortunately, but I was able to sing when he did a cappella pieces. So um, yeah, so it started off as a hobby, very similar to Katerina, and I'm so nervous going behind her. But yes, this bill today, I'm like, oh my God, these women composers are phenomenal. So I'm just very grateful to be in the room. But yeah, so it started off as a hobby, songwriting mostly, and then got to Spelman College and took an introduction to composition class with Dr. Kevin Johnson, who is still the director for the Glee Club now. And yeah, the homework assignment was to arrange a Negro spiritual. And I selected Go Down Moses. And I think it was over a weekend and everyone brought their assignments back that Monday. And he looked at mine and was like, Boykin, we're gonna sing yours in rehearsal today. And I was like, really? Okay. And so that was literally the start to my composition journey. And with that aside, we are going to listen to Go Down Moses, which is literally the first piece that I've ever written for treble voices. And I'm going to try and share the sound and the score at the same time. 1 second. Okay, cool. Okay. Oops. All right, here we go. All right. So that's Go Down Moses. Yes. And it's funny because that is literally the only spiritual to date that I have in my catalog. And it's just interesting that it was the first one. But yeah, people always ask me like, oh, we just love your spirituals. And I'm like, I only have one, but I hope you like that one too. But yeah, so that's the only one in the catalog, but it is coming from Spelman College because yes, Spelman was a huge part of my writing for treble voices. A lot of my, I guess, alto 2 range is it's very low, and it's a broad range because that's what I was listening to as a 17, 18-year-old. I mean, they were easily singing, D and C below, middle C. And so that's just what I thought was the standard or their norm. And so by the time that I was creating a lot of these pieces, because that's really where I got my start to, after Go Down Moses, he asked me to arrange Christmas carols and settings of Ave Maria and O Magnum for our Christmas concert. So by the time I graduated Spelman and was trying to shop them out to publishers, the pushback was that the alto range was too low. And so I was like, well, I actually heard it, at Spelman, and it's possible, but it just depends. But yeah, so a lot of the pushback for publishing was that the alto range was too low. But that's where I got my start. And so yeah, I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint. So, or I guess I can talk a little bit about my process and then share another piece. Each process, unfortunately, is very different. It just depends but I like to sit with the text first. So I prefer text first and then music. So I could sit with the text maybe for about 2 weeks or so just to get the text into my body and in my spirit. And then, yeah, and then hopefully maybe the music comes later. And it's maybe about a day or 2-day process. So I don't write unless I have an idea or I'm inspired. I'm not one of those composers that kind of, I guess, writes exercises every day. I think Eric Whitaker sets aside 7 or 8 hours to write every day. Yeah, no, I can't do that. I would rather watch, Housewives of Atlanta or something. I don't know. So, so I don't write every day. I have to be inspired, and I never force myself to write. So if it's not there, I don't do it. But when it is there, it is an all-day process or 2-day process, and I order Uber Eats, all the stuff to keep me going, or coffee. But I'm literally writing probably all day just to get whatever piece out of my system. And that is pretty much my process. I was going to play Music of Life, but I think I'm not, because I think that piece has been widely circulated. So I'm gonna switch and maybe do We Sing as One. It is another kind of Spelman piece. It was written for our 133rd dedication of Spelman, or Spelman's birthday. Yeah, and so I'm gonna share a little bit of that. Find it. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so We Sing is One, another very special piece to me, near and dear to my heart, because it is Spelman, or Spelman affiliated. And I'm going to share my sound too. And at the end of all of this, I will tell you where, if you are interested in purchasing. But We Sing as One. There is a gap for like a spoken word or poem. And then, so when it was premiered, they actually spoke the history of the Spelman College Glee Club and Spelman College. So there's about maybe 5 or 7 minutes of speaking, but I'm gonna skip through that. But here's the piece.
So to my, I will hold as one. Amen.
So that is We Sing as One. Thank you. Thank you. Come back to the PowerPoint. So here is a list of some of the treble music that I have. It is not a comprehensive list. I'm a little behind on updating my own website and then sharing what pieces have been transferred either to Oxford or Graphite. But for the most part, this is probably majority of them. So Clavia Press is my own publishing company, and Graphite with Jocelyn Hagan, and Oxford, of course, everyone knows Oxford University Press. They are the ones that have Music of Life. So that's kind of where everything is right now. And if you would like to stay in touch with me, that's all of my social media. And I will end, I know a few people heard it at the beginning of the session, but I'm going to end with Stardust. And Stardust is probably one of my favorites right now. Middle school voices, or SSA. It was originally composed for SSA, but it has been rearranged for SAAvvy now and now TTB, but it was originally for SSA, and I'm going to share it with you now. Thank you. Let's see. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And that is my time.
Thank you so much, BE. Brian, I'm going to pass it over to you to introduce our last composer.
With pleasure. Our last composer is Marie-Claire Sandon. She's a Franco-Ontarian composer based in Montreal. She began creating music in high school, where she wrote and produced her first musical. How exciting is that? Joan of Arc. She continued to participate in many collaborations, from choral pieces to scoring short films and full documentaries, to accompanying dancers, fiddling in a team of folk musicians on a historical steam train. Even that sounds like a song in and of itself, right? We need something. She sang in the award-winning female vocal ensemble Concerto della Donna, led by acclaimed choral director Ewan Edwards. She holds a B. Muse in composition from the Schulich School of Music at McGill University, and an M. Muse composition in film and multimedia music from the University of Montreal. She currently scores films, composes choral commissions, and is composer in residence for the Montreal Upper Voice Ensemble at Lysia. Without further ado, let us introduce our wonderful friend and composer, Marie-Claire.
Thank you, Brian. I have to admit, the steam train thing feels like a lifetime ago. Long story short, there's a big steam train, and we have 3 teams. You've got fiddlers paired up with guitarists who are also singers, and then you go from coach to coach on this historical steam train going from Ottawa to like Wakefield in Quebec, and then we just go and make lots of noise and then leave the coach. And that's how I got to learn a lot of traditional music, which I will talk about in a minute, because that's definitely influenced a lot of my writing. So, as Brian said, I'm from the Ontario area. I was born and raised in Ottawa, and I'm going to figure out how to stop myself modding, because I don't like hearing myself talk. That's weird. Anyway, so what I grew up with, it sounds a little similar to BE, because my mom was a singer-songwriter, so she would bring me to all of her musical projects quite often as a kid. So in my mind, it was normal to have a mother who had recorded a vinyl, because back then it was vinyls, and why wouldn't your mother have a vinyl produced? It's normal. So I wouldn't write my own songs, because I started with the violin, and I started way too early, and I just didn't like to practice, but it was my instrument for the longest time, until I gradually started writing, because I'd had friends who were writing, and just watching my mom go and going, okay, I can try this. Also, I injured my arm playing. So I told myself, okay, how can I keep doing music? Because clearly this whole practicing thing, and it's I'm not, this is not my thing. So violin is still my main instrument, but then I wondered if I could conduct. I wonder if I could, and this is I'm 17 years old. And then Lord of the Rings came out. And I went, I want to be part of a big project like that. How could I do it? Maybe I could do costume design. And my mom's standing behind me going really? 3 days later, I was like, oh, right, film music. Okay, there we go. So I went to university thinking that I would do film music as a main job. But I was also the kind of person that was very focused on do my studies, have great grades, and that's going to be success. So when I was in high school, there was this fantastic choral director who was also our theory teacher. And again, in our theory class, he was like, all right, everybody, you have to go and compose a piece on this poem that I'm going to give you. And then, we're going to grade you. And we have a guest composer coming in, and he'll, we'll give him the 4 best ones that we think he should judge, and then he'll judge the best one, and voila, that'll be that. So I did my homework, gave it in. This is sounding familiar. It's very similar to BE. And so the jury took that one, and then the composer himself too, when he came in, it was Stephen Hatfield. And he, yeah, exactly. So he said, you know, this is great. Why don't I put in a good word at Bouygues and Hawkes, send it in, and see if we can't get you published. And 3 or 4 years later, because that's how long it took, it was finally published. By then, it was almost done my bachelor's degree. So in my head, I hadn't considered choral music as a possibility for a career. So I was still gung-ho on film music, and I was learning very avant-garde techniques, and it wasn't my style, and I felt very out of place. So when I started my master's in film music, I wasn't playing violin anymore as much because I didn't have any more lessons, and then, you know, I can't do the steam train thing during school, so that's just summer. So I needed a musical outlet, joined a choir, and never looked back. So same thing, got into the choir, and then finally that piece of mine got published. It was Le Train d'Hiver, for those of you who might know it. And so the conductor just saw the Bouygues and Hawkes catalog at the end of my first year there, and he said, hey, hold on a minute, that's you. And so he started asking me to write music. So for a good 4 or 5 years under his mentorship, I just wrote whatever the heck I felt like writing, instead of feeling like I have to do a certain style or certain technique. And that's where it went from there. So I still do film, but very rarely. I have one client right now, and she does documentaries, and she brings me in early in the projects, which is great because then I know what's going on, and it's really interesting. I'm terrified of the next score I have to do because the last time I did a film score was 4 years ago. So anyhow, whereas the last time I did choral music was last week. So choral music is my main thing, and then film happens because it's interesting and it's good to get out of my bubble once in a while. Very often I will be asked to write French-Canadian music, whether it be traditional or not, because there doesn't seem to be a repository of modern French choral music. It's very hard to find. So I'm constantly being commissioned to write French music. And one of the first things I wrote was French. Actually, half of my scores are in French. The scores I'll be showing you today are actually English. But I think the one that was played at the beginning, Terre Neuve, that's one that I absolutely enjoyed writing. I'm not going to show it today, but I'll show you where you can find my list of pieces at the end there. I'm kind of regretting not doing a document or a PowerPoint. It's fucking quite disorganized compared to the other two. So I will start with, I kind of have other than the Francophone music, I kind of have 3 styles-ish. I'll have a little more difficult music, whether it has body percussion or it has a lot of rhythmic or technical difficulties in there. I'll have the more melodic high school kind of pieces that secretly are my favorite to write. And I saw a question in the comments, do you have to be a good pianist to write a piano accompaniment? I would say it helps a lot, but I'm a fiddler. I don't play piano. I do the best I can with piano accompaniments, and then I throw my accompaniment to other pianists and say, is this playable? What can I change? That includes my brother, my sister-in-law, my husband. So I'm well surrounded. So the first one I'm going to share is We Are the Ones, and you can find that at Hal Leonard now, I think. So let me just find the share, and the score is actually directly on the video, so we should be able to do that one. We are the ones. We are the ones. We are the ones. was We Are the Ones. And it's probably, like, I think we've all been saying which ones are our favorite. This is one of my favorites also. And it was published right at the beginning, like it came out right at the beginning of COVID. So I'm trying to bring it to life now. So that's more of my high school type of SSA that I do. And then, of course, I'm going to do more community choir SSA. I'm still learning how to write even more accessible music and still have it be good music. I've written a lot of horrible music. You will never see that one. But it's an ongoing process, a learning process for me. And I think, so one piece that I have is called Common Silence, and it's from a project that Katerina was part of also, where a bunch of Canadian composers got asked by a bunch of Canadian conductors during the pandemic to look at brainstormings and diaries and collages and all kinds of things that these conductors created during the pandemic, early in the pandemic, regarding on how they felt about this whole being in a lockdown, being unable to do music, and all that stuff. And then they asked us 10 composers to take a look at those and try to write pieces coming out of that. So Katerina did one, which I love. I love Voiceless. But that was one of the things that conductors had been saying a lot, is they felt like they were silenced, they felt like they didn't have any voice. But also the other common theme that popped out was there's a lot of feeling of togetherness despite being all separated. Like communities rallied together more as much as they could. So I tried to have those two contrasting images, silence and community. And there's a poet I absolutely love. I abuse of using her poetry all the time. We Are the Ones is hers. And I just went on her blog and I typed the word silence, and the first thing that popped up was the text Common Silence. And I was like, what are the odds? So it's a cappella. It's originally for SA. It can potentially be SSAA with some splits in the middle, but it can be just two voices. And it's also accessible as SCTB, and I have it as TTBB also. Helen Leonard doesn't have that version, but again, originally SA. I sang it myself, and unfortunately I don't have a recording of the SA version except the Choir of Me's. So you're gonna hear the Choir of Me's with this, or a part of it anyway. Very auto-tuned. I will not hide that fact. So, sharing my screen. Yes. So I'll just hit play and then I'll go find the score next to it. Can you hear that? Some funking happening. In common silence, in common silence is found. In common silence is often found rare answers. Is often found rare answers. Listen closely. Listen closely. Listen closely. Listen, listen. The heartbeat you feel. The heartbeat you feel emanate. The heartbeat you feel may emanate from the world, not just your own chest. And I'm gonna stop it there because I see the time running by. But it gives you a good idea. This piece also has it's 3 haikus, so it has 3 distinct parts to it, and it has a great build up. Well, I called it great. I wrote it. Well, that feels weird. There's a build up I love that I wrote at the end. I like build ups. So I find it fairly accessible. It's fairly low as far register goes at the end. So it's okay to sing that piece in different keys if you feel like it. I really don't mind. So hopefully that's helpful to know that. And then the last one, just to show you what more complex stuff I can write that you can find in my repertory. This one is called The Girl with the Numbers, and it's kind of like a little portrait of Katherine Johnson, who was the NASA mathematician that calculated the flight trajectory of the first manned flight to the moon, or in orbit, or both. She did the moon also, that's right. So I'm going to share you just a little section of that to give you an idea. And I'll stop it there because my time is up. So that was The Girl with the Numbers, and the last thing I'll say about that is I loved it because within the first few pages of her autobiography, she says that numbers followed her everywhere. Similar to us musicians where we have music in our head all the time, hers it was numbers, and I just found that fascinating, and that's where that came from. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. To Marie-Claire, to BE, and to Katerina for giving up their time on a weekend afternoon. I see some people are writing into the chat, and so I encourage you, if you do have questions, we just have a few moments, and this is your chance. If you want to put it into the chat, if you'd like to unmute yourself, we're a small enough group, you could just unmute and shout it out. And then this is recorded, so we will share the recording later, as well as lists of resources to get to all of these pieces from these composers. Okay. I see a specific question for Katerina from Kathy. Any suggestions for teaching fire?
Yeah, so I often suggest that people, I should have mentioned this earlier, but I was so excited that I was just going on tangents. This one's a great one to learn orally. So I would actually say, don't give them the score to start, learn the different loops so they all know the different parts, then look at the score, because it works really well as a map. And I've composed it in that way because it's much easier to memorize in that way. And then your choristers are also thinking a lot more like a composer and think large scale in terms of how their pieces fit in with everyone else. So I think that'll make it a different kind of process to explore, but also make the piece an easier learn. Does that help / answer the question? Yes? Okay. Yeah, dive in orally. I love learning that way. So
I'd love to hear if you could each just say like who are some of your favorite composers. Doesn't necessarily need to be treble choral music, but who do you like to listen to? Who inspires you?
I'll jump in. Persephone Powell, of course, and Andrea Ramsey. Huge fan. Huge, huge fan.
I was really influenced by the Canadian choral composers, so Eleanor Daly and I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding. I absolutely adore Bjork, and I would never be able to attain her awesomeness, but I love listening to her stuff. um, and then just whoever, I just love hearing new stuff from all kinds of different composers myself.
I think one of the first composers that really piqued my interest growing up in choir was Canadian composer R. Murray Schafer. I was very drawn to the graphic elements in his scores and just how he could achieve like really complex, intricate textures with very simple effects. So that I absolutely loved in his music. I also later in choir we sang with the Hamilton Children's Choir. We were the first choir to do the SSA version of Snow Angel. So I also fell in love with Sarah Cortell's music, starting with that piece and sort of nerded out listening to a lot of her stuff while I was in university as well. So definitely Sarah Cortell, but also Alanis Morissette. I'm a huge fan of Regina Spektor. I think I said Joni Mitchell earlier as well. Lots of sort of folk-esque kind of singer-songwriters.
Be brave, y'all. This is it. This is it. Be
I'd
brave.
just like to say that I grew up with Imant Ramesh. I'm not sure if many of you know of him, but I've done most, I think, of his treble choir music, and I actually sang with him as a child. So his rich harmonies and etc. But Stephen Hatfield and Sarah Quettel and all these composers. But have a look at Imant Ramesh.
Yeah, I got introduced to his art songs actually when I was an undergrad, and those were some of my favorite to sing. So I see we're also getting a visit from Mary Claire's cat. I can't not look at that right now.
I wanted to pipe up and sorry for the tail. To pipe up and "Rise Up My Love" by Iman Ramin is just fantastic, buddy.
I see a question in the chat from my dear friend Jaquetta, who sings with me in a chord. Where do you look for text inspiration?
So many poetry books, libraries, friends, recommendations, old classmates that happen to write text, old roommates that happen to write texts.
I've actually been doing a lot of my own lyric writing lately. I'm in the midst of taking a course to sort of formalize my lyric writing skills through Berkeley Online. So I've been doing more and more of that. I think the first piece I showed you, All Together We Are Love, I did the lyrics for. So I've always dabbled a little bit because I came from a background as a songwriter. Although I do set texts from other people. In Her Image, which I showed you, was a poet I commissioned named Lauren Pete, who grew up singing in choir with me. So I do also commission living poets as well. Like to switch it up because every poetic voice results in a different musical treatment. And I think that's a really nice challenge. So.
For me, I guess I've been a fan of like Maya Angelou for a very long time, grew up with her works, but as far as like setting for choral music, I have grown to love working with living poets. So I've used some of my aunt's texts, and I have a few friends who have written poetry. And so like, I just love working with living writers. So that's been pretty cool.
I want to add, no question is silly.
Brian, anything you want to add at the end here? You're muted.
Zoom. Uh, just that this has been wonderful, and I think everything has gone how we were hoping it would. And I know I've been asking some questions throughout this from all of you. It sounds like this was a pretty interesting thing, and Liz and I will discuss more possibilities for the future. I think there's a lot of wonderful composers, that we can share. And I think the more we learn about all of you and what goes behind your music, really makes it more special when we program it. And I think because what we do is about people. And I know love when I have a connection with one of you and I can program your music and say, hey, this person's really amazing and super cool. And I think anytime we can bring people together is better. So it looks like this is something that we'll bring back, as well as some other fun sessions. So thank all of you for coming and spending time out of your day to spend some time talking about your music and your craft and your artistry, and we're just very grateful.
Yes, one more round of applause for our wonderful guests, please. And I wanted to highlight, we have our New York ACDA president here, Doreen Freiling. Thank you for joining us. And Jocelyn Thomas, who was really instrumental in getting out the graphics and helping us to publicize. So thanks to them for all their work behind the scenes and their support. And if you're not an ACDA member, we encourage you to get in there, jump in the pool, start swimming with the rest of us, because it's good company. And I look forward to connecting with all of you in one way or another throughout the year. So thanks, everybody. We'll be in touch very soon. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye for now.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.